to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. I'm in a sort of makeshift studio in Maryland. And in our Washington, D.C. office is Gareth Porter. Gareth is an investigative historian and journalist. And we're discussing Barack Obama's plan for getting out of Iraq. Thanks for joining us, Gareth.
Thank you, Paul.
Before we kick off, let me play you a little clip from President Obama's announcement of his plans for withdrawal from Iraq.
Let there be no doubt. Iraq is not yet secure, and there will be difficult days ahead. Violence will continue to be a part of life in Iraq. Too many fundamental political questions about Iraq's future remain unresolved. Too many Iraqis are still displaced or destitute. Declining oil revenues will put an added strain on a government that has difficulty delivering basic services. Not all of Iraq's neighbors are contributing to its security. Some are working at times to undermine it. And even as Iraq's government is on a sure footing, it is not yet a full partner politically and economically in the region or with the international community.
Sir Gareth, what do you make of President Obama's statement? This piece seems to be less a reason for getting out than perhaps a reason for staying.
Well, exactly. It really is a bit of a mismatch with the main theme that his speech is supposed to be about, which is that the United States is ending its war in Iraq. This does, in fact, sound like a kind of a proto-rationale for a longer-term U.S. engagement in Iraq, and, in fact, the rationale for the Obama administration to really take responsibility, continued responsibility for the outcome in Iraq. And one would think that a president who is in the process of disengaging and getting out of Iraq would not be making that kind of rhetorical flourish about the continued dangers to security and to the regime in Iraq. And beside that, it seems to me it's a bit of an exaggeration to talk about the situation in Iraq in those terms. Certainly, in relative terms, the situation has changed dramatically over the last 18 months. And you have commanders, both in the Shiite South, U.S. commanders, in the Shiite South as well as in the Sunni west of Iraq, declaring in recent weeks that the situation is such that U.S. troops could have gone home some time ago. So, you know, there certainly was an opportunity there for President Obama to take a rather different tack and say this is the moment when the United States should be not only in the process of withdrawing, but disengaging from taking responsibility for the situation in Iraq. It's up to the Iraqis.
Let me play another clip from President Obama where he elaborates on this theme.
So let me say this as plainly as I can. By August 31st, 2010, our combat mission in Iraq will end. As we carry out this drawdown, my highest priority will be the safety and security of our troops and civilians in Iraq. So we will proceed carefully, and I will consult closely with my military commanders on the ground and with the Iraqi government. There will surely be difficult periods and tactical adjustments. But our enemy should be left with no doubt. This plan gives our military the forces and flexibility they need to support our Iraqi partners and to succeed. After we remove our combat brigades, our mission will change from combat to supporting the Iraqi government and its security forces as they take the absolute lead in securing their country. Initially, this force will likely be made up of 35,000 to 50,000 U.S. troops.
So what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, you know, this rhetoric about ending the U.S. war in Iraq is really far too definitive and really quite profoundly misleading. What's really happening clearly is that the United States will continue to be involved in combat in Iraq well beyond August 2010. The question really is whether the promise or the pledge that President Obama has made in this speech that he intends to withdraw all of U.S. troops by the end of 2011 will in fact be be realized. And I think what this speech and what we know about the background of the situation in terms of the freedom that the military has been given to organize this residual force or this transitional force by President Obama raises the question of whether the military really now has a kind of grip on Iraq policy, which can force President Obama's hand should the situation change in any way in Iraq that would give them a rationale for doing so. I think that's really the great concern that we all should have about this speech and the implications that it has for the future.
I guess it all goes back to what is the actual objective of U.S. policy now under the Obama administration. Has it changed at all from the Bush administration in terms of what outcome they want to see here? Perhaps the key line in this statement, and I'm going to play it again now.
But our enemy should be left with no doubt. This plan gives our military the forces and flexibility they need to support our Iraqi partners and to succeed.
What I'm wondering is if the line "our Iraqi partners" is really the key line here, that there's a sort of a political stabilization of sorts that's happened with under the current troop levels in the United States, which has meant the Maleki government and the Maleki's party and Maleki's coalition forces is increasingly more powerful and increasing the strengths of the central government. And what is really being said here is we'll leave enough troops that have to be left to make sure Maleki stays in charge of Iraq. Is that the real subtext?
It's profoundly unclear, I must say, exactly what President Obama means to say in addressing America's enemies in Iraq in this way and suggesting that we're going to have the forces here that would be required apparently to take on any conceivable contingencies in that country. You know, one could deduce from this language that the forces that are going to be there, even beyond 2010, are going to be capable of carrying out major combat operations. Otherwise, why should you address these unnamed enemies in that way? It seems to be language which is aimed at sort of deterrence of the Sunnis as well as of the Shiites who might potentially be interested in making some sort of military move. The point that I would make, however, is that clearly, whether you're talking about the Sunni former insurgents who we've been paying off to remain quiet over the last couple of years, or about the followers of Muqtada al-Sadr, former members of the Jaish al-Mahdi, the Mahdi army. You're talking about leaders and followers who understand that the United States is supposed to be getting out of Iraq, and therefore their calculation is going to be, well, why would we make any move now? Let's wait until after 2011. So this either is a really meaningless rhetoric, or it means that the United States is positioning itself for a longer term military stay in Iraq, which means the potential for carrying out large-scale combat well beyond 2011.
35 to 50,000 troops are going to be enough to, quote, support our partners. They have to be a fighting force. They can't be anything else. In the next segment of our interview, let's talk a little bit about what this force might be doing and the 2011 commitment to get out altogether and whether or not it looks like that is going to be respected. And again, it goes back to the basic question, what is the outcome that U.S. policy wants in this situation? Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Gareth Porter.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.